This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to episode 212 of the Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. APIs are the backbone of modern interconnected software systems. Join us at the API Live at Manning conference to ensure your APIs are flexible, functional, and user-friendly. Listen to expert speakers discuss API design patterns, effective development methodologies, and the latest tools for designing amazing APIs at the Live at Manning API conference. Go to geekleader.com/API for more information. Again, this conference is August 3rd, and it's free. Again, geekleader.com/API. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I have the author of Leaders in Lockdown, Atholl Duncan, and he is also a leadership and coach and executive coach. He's helped many other leaders. He's held forums for CIOs and in the past to help us figure out what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, what we need to improve on. And we're going to talk about his book today, and hopefully a little bit more, talk about how COVID has changed some of the working environments. And I'm sure we've all, especially in technology, have had to find new ways of doing things. And what are those changes are going to be permanent? What are changes are just for now? And how do we best lead through those kind of changes? So with all that being said, Atholl, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on, and a most amazing time with the world at a crossroads and with many leaders at a crossroads. And what we're trying to do is help them find their way on the next bit of this crazy journey coming out of COVID, John.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about how you got to where you are today, just so they have some context for the conversation.
Okay. So my kind of professional career has been in three parts, I suppose. Act number one, I worked at the BBC as a journalist and a television news executive, really for the best part of 20 years, covering a lot of the world's biggest stories. Act two was really as a transformation leader, as a change leader, in a whole bunch of different businesses, from utilities to media to professional services. And Act three is kind of where I am just now. Hopefully not the last act, but Act three, I have a number of board roles on advisory boards, chair a few things, and I work as an executive coach. And I've become the author of this book during the most crazy and challenging and heartbreaking period for many people in this generation.
Mm-hmm. So where are you calling from today?
So I'm in Scotland today.
Okay.
I'm in a place called North Berwick, which has amazing links to the US all through golf, because this is, they call this the Golf Coast, not the Gulf Coast down here, but we have the Golf Coast. And we have more championship golf course links here in a few miles than probably anywhere else in the world. But most of my life, working out of London, working internationally, fortunate enough to do quite a lot of work in the States, mainly out of New York, but got a lot of great friends, great business contacts in the States, and still through my executive coaching, do quite a bit of work across the pond.
So what got you interested in leadership? Like, why was it, what was it about leadership that made you want to like grab a hold of that and focus on executive coaching and how leaders respond and things like that?
Well, great question. What got me interested in leadership to start with was the BBC, huge organization, very well respected around the world, sometimes not that respected by some people in Britain, but respected around the world. The guy who was the boss of the BBC at the formative time of my life observed that the reason the BBC wasn't very well run was all that we did was we took the program makers, we took the creatives, and we made them the leaders, and we never trained them. And so he put in place a leadership program, and I think a lot of other people didn't want to go in it. So I ended up going on the leadership program, and took me through quite a journey at the BBC, Harvard, Cranfield, which is a business school in the UK, and I became fascinated with what makes a leader tick, and how do you lead change? How do you lead change in organizations? Then went out, did Harvard in practice, working to try and change organizations. And now when I came to this part of my life, really all about trying to help people not make the mistakes that I made, and I made plenty of them, and help people try and find their way. And it's changed so much in this period, which we can talk about. So much more difficult for people to navigate their way out of where we are right now.
So how much have you seen COVID affect or maybe bring to light the true nature of certain leaders, and how have you seen like the importance of leadership during a time like this?
Well, we work on, and maybe some of your listeners will be familiar with the various kind of psychometric assessments that are done in corporate life, and we work with one called Hogan, and it looks at your bright side, your dark side, and your inside. And really, the dark side is all about the bad stuff that appears when we're under stress. And that we've never been under a greater period of stress. Someone the other day put forward a theory that down the line we'll have more post-traumatic stress from business leaders than we would normally get in a significant war. So I think that's still to come. But we have seen leaders have to face stress that they've never seen before. We've had to see them make decisions in a volume and at a pace that they've probably not had to do before. So this huge leadership has been accelerated, personified, magnified in this period, probably like we haven't seen before. So huge and fascinating time to be studying how leaders got on, and which leaders did well and which leaders didn't, and how, the big point, how leadership has probably changed because of what we've been through.
Yes, let's talk about that a little bit. How has leadership changed? And what qualities, would you say are more important now than they were, 5 years ago?
Well, agility. I mean, if you look at the pace of change, so agility, definitely. I think the second thing that comes out of the crisis is that it's probably the end of command and control, the end of presenteeism, and what we see now. And this is just a trend that this was coming before COVID, but it's been hugely accelerated by COVID. I think you see this now as the time of the compassionate, caring, listening, authentic, empowering leader. The leader who is able to say, I don't have all the answers. So I think you've seen that grow during the crisis.
Yeah, I think, being here in the States, we've seen that on a political scale as well, how, that command and control phase have kind of shifted a little bit. But, I've noticed that it's been a trend over the past, I don't know, maybe 10 years that I've been focusing on leadership and management styles that I've seen, more about. I guess for me, it started with Simon Sinek's, start with why. Tell people why. Don't just tell them do it because I said do it, but start with why. And I saw that as kind of kicking off a trend of getting into the empathetic leader, and being more empathetic with your people. You talked about agile, talking, with a Scrum manifesto, talking about people over process and things like that, and focusing on the people. And it's just, I've seen that trend just continue. And when COVID, kind of hit home and people had to change, how they worked, where they worked, when they worked, and focus more on, saving lives and helping families than, just being in the office on time. You got to see the real compassionate leaders kind of come out and shine.
Yeah. And, at the peak of this crisis, many people did incredible things, remarkable things in their businesses. The pivot, I don't like that word, but the pivot was awesome in so many places. And one of the things that we've been doing through this book that I've written, we've been doing a lot of workshops off the back of that. And we're talking to people about how they lead out of lockdown. What do they do next? What has
Mhm.
changed? What have they learned from what they've been through? How has it changed them as leaders? And how do they need to lead out of lockdown? And one thing we ask in that is, what do you want to hold on to from the crisis? What was good in your leadership and in your team and in your business in the crisis? What do you want to leave behind? And people talk about, yes, the agility and the pace. They want to hold on to that, but in a sustainable way, not at a level that they're going to exhaust their staff and break down their staff. So definitely we want to hold on to this agility and pace. And how do we do that? How do we get rid of bureaucracy? How do we make things happen? Focus. At the peak of the crisis, leaders focused on the truly right things to do. And how do we hold on to that and not go back to leaders being busy fools, if you like? Working together was seen by many of the leaders and the clients that we work with. There was some awesome working together. There was a necessity. The silos came down, so that was good. We've talked about care and compassion, and probably the final thing was trust. There was great trust in many situations at the peak of this crisis. And how do we hold on to that? How do leaders hold on to that? So you get a manifesto for how we want to change the way we run our businesses and the way we lead. And then we come down to the crucial point as well. How do we do it? And how do we not just go back to the way we were? That's a big question.
So how is that? Because we have this, it's almost like an internal struggle where we always say, when are things going to get back to normal? When is it going to be normal again? And we have this word normal. What is normal? What is normal now? Is normal now different than normal before COVID? And do we really want everything to be back to normal? Or is there some things that we really like the change that we've seen? Is there some things that are progressing? You talk about inequality, as one of the things in the book that we've struggled through. Is that something that we want to get back to normal, or do we want to keep that change? So how do we choose what we change and what we don't change, and how do we keep those things that you talked about are important that we want to hold on to when lockdown's over?
Well, we're never going back to the way we were. So forget that. If that's what you think is going to happen, it's a false promise, or it's a recipe for demise, in my opinion, because your competitors are moving forward and they're going to a different place, right? So just get that out of the mind. And what you need to focus on is, how do you shape the new future, the new world of work? And what does that look like? And we don't entirely know. I suggest in this book, Leaders in Lockdown, which we interviewed 28 global business leaders during the crisis on how they'd led in the crisis and how they think the world's going to change. And we came up with 7 themes. And the 7 themes at pace are: number 1, the new age of purpose, and how we saw that purpose was on steroids for many businesses. And instead of talking about it, which we did for the last 20 years, and just sticking it on your website, which many companies did, this was now the moment when purpose absolutely mattered. And we need to take that forward after the crisis and put it's your Simon Sinek, start with why. The new world of work, of course, and we move these, but it's not just that we move these millions and millions of people from home to office. We still to invent what hybrid working is going to look like. And we've still to invent, I believe, a new psychological contract between employer and employee will come out of this. The people who are innovative and very creative and very flexible about this will be the winners. They'll win the talent war. And there is a talent war that's coming. 2 things. There's the great resignation is coming, when millions and millions of people are going to move out of the jobs that they're currently in because they're not happy with it, or they're not happy with the change that might be forced upon them. So there's the great resignation and the new world of work. Number 3 was tackling inequality. You mentioned it there. Inequality is widened at many, many levels by this crisis. From the people who were worst affected by it, who fell ill from it, who died from it, to the people who are made unemployed by it, to the people who have access to, in many parts of the world, the people who have access to the world, to the vaccine. So it's going to widen inequality, no doubt about
Yeah.
that. Global cooperation has kind of broke down in another way in the middle of this crisis, not just between China and the US, but in many other parts of the world. What was going on in Europe, what was going on in the UK, was not a sign of political leaders cooperating across boundaries for the greater good. What happened in Europe and the UK, there was a lot of political leaders who were looking inwards and sowing division. So where does global cooperation come from in the future? And the big corporates have a role to play. And they played that role with the vaccine, and to a certain extent, the tech companies played that role with track and trace, with the technology. So, there's an expectation that big corporates can be, in some situations, more effective and more powerful than governments going forward.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think that's where all the change really has to happen. Is in the corporations, not in the government.
Yeah. And, even I've been on a couple of calls recently, businesses that I'm working with who have large groups of colleagues in India. Mm-hmm. And on these calls, these people are reaching out to help their colleagues in India. They're raising huge amounts of money from their corporate foundations. They're taking action to help and care for people in India. They, within my visibility, are acting more responsibly and more effectively than many governments, because they want to help their colleagues, and that's a great and kind of heartwarming thing to see.
Absolutely, and I've seen that. With my wife, she works in tech as well, and she has a team in India. And it's like the culture over there sometimes is very prideful. You want to, achieve what you say you're going to do. You want to get everything done correctly and do it the best of your ability. And they had a call and they were delayed on certain things because, COVID has, ransacked them in many ways. Yeah. And I don't think there's a person on her team that hasn't had a family member pass away or get seriously ill. So when the guy from India was talking and said, I know we're late. She's like, no, you're not late. Don't worry about that. What we care about is you and your family. And it just means so much to, that when companies say, it's not about getting the work done right now. Right now, we can put that aside. That's not important. What's important is your livelihood. What's important is your family. What's important is your health, and how we can, what can we do here in the United States to help you over there?
Exactly. Exactly. And this is where politicians can become terribly out of touch, I think, because this democratization of corporations and this feeling that we have that these people are our colleagues, whichever countries they are in around the world, and I think that is a heartwarming. I take my hat off to your wife, and I take my hat off to thousands, and hopefully in the future millions of people who are like that, who don't see international boundaries as places to cause division, but they want to cross international boundaries to help their colleagues and to help the families of their colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. So, why does it matter what piece of dirt you were born on?
Absolutely. I'm with you. And this is where politics is bad in so many parts of the world. And politicians did not have a good crisis. No, I'm struggling to find a politician anywhere who had a good crisis. People cite New Zealand, and I don't wish to be cruel to my friends in New Zealand, but they're a beautiful country, but they're kind of at the end of the line. People are not traveling through New Zealand. It's not an international hub in the way that Europe, Asia, US, UK are. So I think tackling the virus in New Zealand was done extremely effectively, but we're not facing quite the same challenges as the people of New York and the people of London, and indeed the people of New Delhi.
Yep, absolutely.
So I got to theme number 5 is resilience, not just financial, operational, personal. Theme number 6 was resetting the supply chain, because the international supply chain just broke down, didn't it? And theme number 7, which is in our world, John, is maximizing potential. A lot of that stuff that we talked about. What kind of leader triumphed during the crisis? and what kind of a leader do we need to take us out of this crisis and take us to a better place. And a lot of stuff in there as well about mental welfare and physical welfare of workers and executives. So those were the 7 themes of the leaders in lockdown. And through all that, was this speed of change, this incredible pace of change where, particularly in digital, you probably saw in virtual, you probably saw things move 10 years in 10 months, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was, when you went from one weekend or 1 week we're at work and everybody's in the office, you're doing things as normal. And, you have the occasional employee that travels and takes, connects to the VPN, and a few people that work remotely here and there. And to the next week where you have to mobilize, your entire company, and everybody has to be able to work remote, and everybody has to have a laptop now, where, at one point only 25% had laptops and everybody else had desktops. What do? How do you make this happen? How do you make file share easy? How do you protect your network doing something like this too? Because I think we're going to see another crisis coming right out of this, which is cyber, and we've seen that a little bit in the United States with the pipeline attack where, that shut down gasoline for the East Coast for, about a week.
Yeah.
But we're going to see a lot more of things like that happening. And, in talking to some of our cybersecurity leaders that have been on the show, they're seeing, cyber attacks up 30 to 40%. And if that continues, we've got another crisis to deal with right at the end of COVID, and how do we change? How are we agile, and how do we protect that? Like you said, with the advancements in digital, we did move really far ahead, but we opened up some holes for some gaps there too.
Here's my challenge to tech leaders, or to all leaders, but it impacts mainly on tech leaders, is we could have done all this before COVID, right? We had the technology to do it. The technology was not an inhibitor. It was the human ability to embrace that change, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we had to do it because of the necessity.
Yep. And I look back on it. I teach part-time at a university here in South Carolina. And at that school, we have talked about, I've been teaching for about 15 years, and we've talked about online classes and doing online. And we offer hybrid classes where it's in the classroom and online, but never fully online at this university, because it was, I guess, kind of thought us prestigious to be in the classroom and coming to this university, not doing things online. And when COVID, hit and they had to move online, it was like, well, now we've got to do it. We've had the technology. We've been doing hybrid classes for, 10 years, but we haven't pulled the trigger and done the actual virtual 100%. And now we have to do that. And it was, again, it wasn't the technology, it was the process and the people.
It's forced the hand, isn't it? It's forced the hand. And if you look at old academic institutions, it might have taken them another 30 years to get there, but they had to do it. They had to do it to survive. So my challenge is the mindset. So let me take you back to February last year when COVID hadn't really hit the West yet. It was just starting to sneak in. If you'd said to people then, we're going to take the world's workforce, we're going to make them work at home, and we're going to keep most of these industries going quite successfully, and the stock market after 15 months is going to be in a pretty good position, they would have taken you away and locked you up, right? But my challenge is, why can't we take the mindset that made that possible, right, and apply that in so many other places? So thinking the unthinkable, because the unthinkable we now know is entirely possible.
Yeah.
So where else can we take that mindset and tackle serious and existential issues for the human race, whether that's in health, or in climate, or in inequality, or in poverty, or in gender? As one of the leaders that I work with put it, so we can move the world's workforce from the office to the home in days, but it's going to take us another 40 years to get a reasonable gender balance at the top of most corporations. Why can't we just do that overnight as well? And I think that's a good challenge, and you could take that into diversity and inclusion and equality in so many other spheres as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's how do you have that mindset? How do you take the mindset when you were forced into something to where there's no pressure now, right? There's no pressure to make these changes that you're talking about that are significant and we need to have them. But with COVID, we had a pressure to get this done right now. Now we don't have the pressure, but how do we apply that internally?
Well, we had a necessity to do it then, because the
Mhm.
necessity, we thought if we didn't do it, we wouldn't survive. Our
Right.
businesses wouldn't survive, and it was coming down to our base instincts, wasn't it? Of
Hmm.
life, death, food, shelter, and all that. How do you do it in more normal times? It takes bold leadership. It takes leadership that understands. I think it takes leadership that listens. And I think it takes leadership that moves towards the new model of empowering leadership. I don't think you make those changes by trying to command and control, because the passive aggressive behavior of the employee who is not bought into change will defeat you.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So you just talked about listening as being super important. How do we as leaders, get out of that command and control mindset and get into a more listening posture?
Well, we've been doing a bit of work. So Black Isle Group, which is a leadership development business, which I work with, we've been doing, as I say, a lot of work on how do we help people out of this. And we've started to drill down into the big problem in leadership development, which is how do you take the knowledge and actually turn it into behavioral change?
Hmm.
And how do you get it into the daily habits of people? So a little bit like these, I don't know what your New Year resolutions are like, John, but if they're like anyone else in the world, and we say we're going to have a better diet, or we're going to exercise, or we're going to drink less alcohol, I think it normally lasts till the middle of January if you're very good. And the reason for that is we don't actually take it into our daily habits and repeat it in our daily habits. We don't take actions that will embed that change. So the key for me, what we've been doing at Black Isle, is we've been trying to solve this. And we look to tech, don't we? But tech is not the only bit of the answer, because we want to surround it with coaching. And our bit of tech, which is based on nudge theory, basically nudges you every day to take actions which will embed that behavioral change. So if listening is what you want to do, or you want to be a more listening leader, we get you to carry out 3 calls a day where you are active listening. You're putting into into practice your active listening. You're praising people 10 times a day. We want you to be more agile. You're fast tracking 3 projects every week that's not going through the bureaucracy of your business. So, whatever the behavioral change is and what the strategic problems are that you're trying to solve, we're trying to break it down to everyday actions that will actually change you, change your business. And if we mount them all up, they might change the world as well.
Absolutely. And so, like you said, jump on some calls, be an active listener. If you want to be more agile, push things through the bureaucracy. How do you keep doing something like that when you run into? I think there's a book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, and he talks about how you run into the resistance. You run into that thing that holds you back and keeps you from doing that uncomfortable feeling. How do you get past that uncomfortable feeling when you're doing these things to stay with it?
Well, we have to get people to buy into the change, don't we? And
Mm-hmm.
here's a burning platform for people to buy into change. Here's a moment where people realize that the way that we've been living and the way that we've been working is not fit for the future. Here's a moment where people realize that another crisis is not far down the line. Will that be the climate crisis? Will it be, as you say, will it be a cyber crisis which threatens our financial systems or threatens our food supplies? What will it be? I don't know, but it's just down the line. this is the burning platform from which we should be building change. And our leadership needs to be bold, and our leadership needs to be at every level, not just at the top of the business. And you saw that with our health professionals, with our carers, the incredible jobs that they did in the most difficult of circumstances. They showed leadership at every level. It wasn't, you didn't need to have leader in your name in the hospitals of the USA to be a hero of this crisis, did you?
Absolutely not. Yeah, you're right.
The same elsewhere in the world. So, when we're leading change in businesses, I think we need a fresh approach, and we need an acceleration of the way that we were going, and we need a rapid acceleration of that. But we're not going back to where we were.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So before we close, I want you to talk a little bit about your leading model and what that is, and how can we maybe apply that as leaders.
So when we're executive coaching, it's always good to have a model, isn't it, to start the conversation, to keep us on track. And I have a book over on a shelf over here, which I think is something like it describes 85 different models of executive coaching. None of them really worked for me. So we ended coming up with an 86th. And really what we did was we asked a large number of coaches, and what are you coaching on? Most of the time, what are you coaching on? And we got from that what we think are the 7 traits, which are either the barrier to you moving to the next level, or they are the things which help you move to the secrets, which help you move to the next level. And to make them memorable, they spell the word leading. And the L in leading is for looking like a leader, not physically, although there's a physical element to it, but it's how you think, behave, act, how you are. And we know what great leaders look like, but do we look like them, or how can we develop so that we look like them? The E, well, there were 3 E's. There was empathy, there was empowerment, and there was emotional intelligence. The A is for awareness, because in coaching, change starts with self-awareness and also with awareness of what's going on around about you. That's the starting point. We can't move into behavioral change unless we're aware of what we're like and what our impact is on others. The D is for delivery, because good leaders deliver. They deliver in complexity, they get things done. The I is for impact, which is all about our communication style. And we talk a lot about clarity, brevity, and impact. And the N is for nurturing. How do we nurture those people around about us? How do we move them? How do we get the round pegs in the round holes and the square pegs in the square holes? And the G, we had a lot of conversation over the G. Some thought it should be about growth. But in the end, we thought growth was actually a result. And we thought what we want, the trait that we want in our leaders, is that they are game changers. They don't just go along and create an incremental difference or a gradual difference. They fundamentally change the game in the business, in the sector, and hopefully in society. And that's the leading model. And it's a good place to start. We talk people through that, and we get them to self-assess against those 7 traits. And then we maybe 360 with some of their colleagues, and how do they see them against these traits? And we quite simply say, well, where do you think you need to get to be a leader that goes to the next level? And then we try and fill the gap. But this comes back to that old book and old saying that what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
And the leading model is about getting you from here to there.
Awesome. I think it's a very memorable acronym too. It's easy to kind of put together and to kind of follow and make sure you're paying attention to those things. I think that's really well done as far as the way you put that together. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. How can people find out more about you, connect with you, and pick up a copy of the book?
So you can get me on my own website, which is athollduncan.com, and Atholl is spelled Atholl, Duncan.com. That's me. The business that I'm most involved in, most proud of, is Black Isle Group, and they're on blackislegroup.com. And then the book is Leaders in Lockdown, which is stories of COVID, lessons from COVID, and how the world's going to change because of what we've been through. And that's on Amazon.com.
Awesome. And I'll link all that up in the show notes at geekleader.com so people can quickly link to all those sites and pick up a copy of the book. Atholl, thanks so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. I enjoyed talking to you, and I think I learned a lot.
It's a pleasure. Take care. Stay safe. And I'm hoping that I'm going to be back in the US as soon as I'm allowed back in through
Awesome.
that border.
Awesome. If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some T-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.